What's up guys, it's Endymion, and for the past few days I've been playing the latest PlayStation exclusive Forspoken, and as I'm sure many of you have seen, the game is getting torn to shreds by the internet. But why? What happened to this game? Who's to blame? And finally, do I think it's worth buying? Well, let's begin. To look at its inception, Forspoken is very clearly a game that's based on ideas that date back to a concept trailer called Agni's Philosophy. That tech demo was created by Square Enix to showcase the power of their new Luminous engine, as well as what their developers could in theory create on PlayStation 4 during that system's release. Many of the concepts of Agni's philosophy seem to be present in Forspoken. From the fantasy meets Middle Eastern environments, a female protagonist surrounded by religious zealots, and towering monsters that look both deadly yet strangely glorious. That tech demo's engine, dubbed the Luminous engine, would end up being used to bring Final Fantasy XV to life, which was an extremely successful release for Square Enix, and it was directed by Hajime Tabata, who also directed Crisis Core. After that game's release, Tabata would create a new studio within Square Enix that would harness the power of the Luminous engine for a new game. This new studio, dubbed Luminous Productions, would take that Agni Philosophy tech demo and then expand it into a full game. That's how Forspoken came to be, although Tabata would end up leaving the company during Forspoken's development to go on to other games and franchises. While I don't think Forspoken is amazing by any means, I don't think it's awful either, but it definitely bears the scars of a troubled development which is sadly becoming way too common these days. It also has a very low audience score, but like always, these audience scores can be done by anyone. I mean, how many of these people actually played the game? It's always suspicious. But then again, not every game can be universally loved like Cory in the House on Nintendo DS, I guess. Anyway, I would describe Forspoken as an open world action RPG where you play as a Final Fantasy magic-based character. It's kind of what I would imagine an open world game would play like if you played as Terra from Final Fantasy VI. Surprisingly, however, the game Forspoken reminded me the most of wasn't Final Fantasy or some Ubisoft open world. In fact, Forspoken, to me anyway, feels like I'm playing a medieval fantasy version of Sucker Punch's Infamous series. Infamous, for those who've played it, is a superhero action-adventure game where you run around a city dealing out justice and leaping off rooftops. I love those games, and a lot of Forspoken's gameplay feels similar to Infamous Second Son in particular. The way you can glide across the world, it feels like an updated version of the Neon superpower in Second Son. You can blast enemies with spells, which feels very similar to using the smoke or electricity powers depending on which Infamous game you've played. One of the best things about Forspoken so far anyway is the verticality of its open world. Most open worlds I've played outside of maybe Insomniac's Spider-Man, they all feel very ground level. And while this is not a bad thing, that emphasis on verticality does help Forspoken in differing itself by allowing you to glide up mountains and jump across cool landscapes with crazy speed. It's really cool. I'm also digging the magical combat, which is understandably very flashy. It's fun to blast enemies and see them fly around like ragdolls, and there's a surprising level of depth to the amount of spells even from the get-go. There's also activities I'm enjoying more than I thought I would, like the labyrinths. They're simple, I mean they're just rooms of enemies you kill and then progress through, but I enjoy them because they're full of loot and they have big enemies to kill at their climax. That activity in particular, it gave me Diablo vibes, and I enjoyed clearing these out to see what new gear I could find. And while the game doesn't necessarily revolutionize the open world genre like Elden Ring did, I can't deny that I'm having fun. As for the opening of the game, Forspoken is a mixed bag, but I think it does well enough to establish what's going on. But to be honest, I find most open world games have lackluster beginnings, unless they're called Skyrim.
Finally awake.
One thing I do find annoying is how often Forspoken relies on fading to black. I mean, once or twice is fine, but it happens almost constantly, which is bizarre to me. Why they didn't just cut to another scene seamlessly is puzzling, but I think it has to do with the Luminous engine.
Finally awake.
That thing made Final Fantasy XV apparently a living hell to develop, and Forspoken is no doubt the same thing. But the fading to black does get a little obnoxious, and at least early on the side quests are also very cookie cutter. But to be honest, what open world game these days actually has good optional side content? Witcher 3 sure, and Skyrim as well, but everything else is pretty much forgettable that I can think of. And unfortunately, Forspoken is like every other modern open world game in that regard. While I don't think Forspoken is going to win any awards or anything, I do think its story is decent so far. The gist is that you're an orphan named Frey who squats in an abandoned apartment with her cat Homer. Frey gets in trouble with the law, she's then given a second chance by the judge, and after an altercation with a gang, Frey, well, she just loses everything. The game does a really good job at making me understand that Frey's life is just awful. I mean, as soon as I saw the Christmas lights in the apartment, I knew this girl was broke as hell. Anyway, Frey is left homeless and alone, and then she's lured into a nearby building by some magical entity where she finds a bracelet, and then she's thrusted into Athia, where the game takes place proper. In a lot of ways, Forspoken is basically an isekai, which is a Japanese genre where an ordinary person is whisked away into another world. Although having not beaten the game or anything, I predict Frey is probably from Athia and her parents left her in New York for some reason, but I can only guess as of right now, but I would bet money that I'm right. The whole gist of the story so far is that the world has been destroyed by something called the Break, which reduces all living things to ash, and whatever survives is corrupted into monsters or worse. Frey, however, is immune to all of this, and because of that, she's able to dive out into the open world and do all the open world things you expect. While Forspoken doesn't reinvent the wheel when it comes to open world games, it's not a terrible game by any stretch in my opinion either. It kind of reminds me of Horizon Forbidden West in ways, and what I mean by that is that you play a character that is seen as a savior by those around them, and you're constantly collecting stuff to make new things, but Forspoken does, especially for being a PS5 next-gen only game, not really live up to its own potential. I think this is again because of that Luminous engine and that Hajime Tabata left the studio during development. That guy was instrumental in making Final Fantasy XV exist after that game's troubled development, and Forspoken is yet another example of this. But I can't deny that it's a fun action RPG where you can glide across landscapes, blasting enemies into dust and collecting stuff. Of course, that doesn't mean that Forspoken's strengths outweigh its weaknesses. It's like for every cool idea or interesting moment, there's something else that is not as good to counterweight it. And like I said, the beginning is not the best, and it takes a while before things really start to open up. The game also has graphical issues like pop-in and weird lighting effects, which unfortunately is not unique to this game. With basically every modern game releasing having problems at launch these days, it's more an underlying sickness the entire industry keeps struggling with as opposed to being unique to this game, unfortunately. And oddly enough, there's no day or night cycle, which I'm not against, mind you, but just thought I'd say it so that you know in case you care. But honestly, I find nighttime in most open world games to be kind of ugly, so if it's just daytime, I'm fine with it. One problem I have with Forspoken and really so many other games is how often developers show a product to look one way only to completely alter it later. Besides this game, the same can be said about Watch Dogs, Final Fantasy XV, Cyberpunk, and so many others. There's too many vertical slice concept trailers that are almost never lived up to, and again, this isn't a Forspoken problem, but an industry-wide one. It's just that this game is the most current example of this annoying trend that devs and publishers just need to stop doing. Also, Forspoken's world does feel lifeless in a way, but the lore reasoning behind it is that the Break has consumed everything. Although it's just a convenient way to have less things on screen, it's similar to the Batman Arkham games finding excuses to have civilians stay inside so that they don't have to render them. There's also a main town that's full of citizens, and this is where you can pick up side quests and interact with all kinds of people. There are so many games that do this, from Monster Hunter or the countless JRPGs that exist these days, so Forspoken having a hub area, it's not really any different. It's fine of course, but again, it's another trend that I'm not that fond of in any game really. However, I do enjoy the architecture, and I do think the outfit designs for the more important characters to be really refreshing. Like, look at these council people. They look really cool. Another thing so far that I'm really enjoying are the boss battles, with the first two being standout moments in the early hours. The dragon fight was dope, and it felt like a Final Fantasy moment to me. There's also this fight against a Fire Knight a bit later on that is really cool too, where you have to destroy the wings in order to make it vulnerable. I'm excited to see what else is out there, but like I said, there are bright spots amongst the darkness with this game. I also enjoy the monster designs too, with them having this mutated teeth-like design to them. It kind of reminds me of the Gaping Dragon from Dark Souls in a way. Another thing I do enjoy is the crafting system, which allows you to place various buffs and upgrades onto your gear. And as you explore, you'll discover new effects that you can then implement. You can also customize your nails for different effects by painting magic glyphs onto your fingers. It's a unique alternative to what other games do, so it's pretty cool and I'll give them credit for that. And now that I've gotten what I've enjoyed so far out of the way, it's time to delve into the internet's takes, and a video of mine wouldn't be complete without some good old-fashioned modern game journalism. So let's look at Polygon's review, where they unsurprisingly injected identity politics into the discussion because Polygon continues to impress me with how awful their takes are. The reviewer, Grayson Morley, went on to say in their review, quote, "Before I wrap up, let's spare a word for Frey, a notionally black protagonist who joins a growing trend in media of putting black people in worlds where race is inconsequential. Except the game is very insistent that Frey is a New Yorker, mysterious birth or no, spending her entire life up until this point growing up in our decidedly non-fantasy world where blackness is not a non-factor. Regrettably, Frey's identity is thinly written and awkwardly deployed as the story leans not only on stereotypical narratives but trauma as a plot device. An early plot point involves Frey holding the lifeless body of an Athian black girl with whom she has bonded, an image that, in the raceless world of Athia, doesn't carry the same weight it does in ours and Frey's. Initially, Frey is spurred to action, vowing revenge for the child's death, which led me to believe, optimistically, that the game was thinking about Frey's identity as more than just the sum of its repeated insistence of her love of kicks and the one time she says okay bet. Unfortunately, like everything in Forspoken, the death is quickly relegated to quip fodder as Frey jokingly calls the child's murderer the kitty killer herself. Which brings us back to square one, a two-dimensional foster kid with a rap sheet who swears so often you'd think she was paid by the mother effer herself, end quote. So according to Polygon, Forspoken gets docked review points because the main character is black and no one in the game hates her or oppresses her because of it. Apparently, if you have a black character in your game, it means they have to fight racism always. Otherwise, why have a black character in the first place? Polygon continues to spew out these idiotic comments, but what can we expect from the social justice idiots over there? In the entire time that I played Forspoken, it's true that no one says anything about her being black because the people of Athia don't see Frey as a black woman, but simply that. A woman. The council even has a black woman on it. There's an Asian guy and even a white dude in power too. And I'm sure Grayson held his head in agony when he saw the white guy on the council because something toxic masculinity. If you couldn't tell, Polygon is trying to magically create a controversy where there isn't one. No one cares that Frey is black, and I'm sure the people of Athia couldn't care less either, because they have more important things to worry about than identity politics, like whether they're going to starve to death or be reduced to ash by the incoming apocalypse. I just find it hilarious that Grayson Morley and his Polygon editors see black people as nothing but identity political piñatas for them to hit whenever a black person is involved. God, I hate Polygon, but anyways. Then of course there's the other big thing the internet is clowning on, which is the dialogue, and honestly, it's not that bad. I mean, at times it's not great, like that one infamous clip going around.
Did I just do that?
Well, definitely with my assistance.
I did not just do that.
We did.
I just moved shit with my mind.
Perhaps our connection has somehow awoken some abilities.
I just moved shit with my mind.
I just keep hearing I.
I just moved shit with my freaking mind! Yeah, okay, that is something I do now. I do magic, talk to sentient cuffs, kill jacked up beasts. You know what? I'll probably fly next.
Now you're just being ridiculous.
Oh, that's too far. Good to know there's a line.
If you could just master these new abilities, with my help, of course.
Did you not just see me take out that gnarly beast? Oh, bring it, you mangled monster.
But there's also some other clips that kind of work if I'm being honest, like this clip here.
Certitude. Such righteous poise. Yet all is demon solid noise.
Shit, alright, if you're gonna rhyme everything, then just kill me now.
I mean, this isn't that bad in my opinion. Maybe my brain is broken, but in all honesty, this dialogue seems about on par with many other games and modern movies, especially Marvel and Star Wars, again, for better and worse. There's also some fun physical comedy too.
Looks like this is the place. Seems like it's seen better days.
Well, you're not going to find what you're looking for out here.
I know. I know. Great start.
And the way this game is written dialogue-wise makes sense once you understand who came up with the world and everything. Firstly, we have Amy Hennig, who is the creator of the Uncharted series when she worked at Naughty Dog. A lot of Forspoken's dialogue actually feels very Uncharted-like, with the hero making quips during serious situations. Even the opening New York segment feels like an Uncharted moment with you running away and leaping over things while making fun of the bad guys. Then we have Gary Whitta, who wrote Star Wars Rogue One, and this is kind of where the westernized influences of Forspoken come together, and it's very apparent for good and for worse. The music is also composed partly by Bear McCreary, who did the God of War Norse Saga games, and Gary Scheinman, but I can't show you that music in fear of copyright because YouTube is dumb like that. But the music is fine. It's like God of War's in that it's honestly just typical background music fare. Weirdly enough, Square Enix has tried in the past to create games with Western creators, but it's basically always failed in the past. I do think that Forspoken would have benefited more from Eastern writers over West, but for what it is, Forspoken's dialogue isn't terrible. Like for example, here we have Frey talking to an old man, and they're saying whoosh to each other, and you're probably thinking, that's terrible and cringe, right? But the context here is that the man she's speaking to has been living in the break for 20 years and his mind is almost completely gone. So his ability to communicate has been reduced to simple words. So while this may look cringe out of context, if you play the game, it makes sense. And that's where I kind of come to the whole internet hating Forspoken thing. I truly believe that a lot of what's being said about this game is being taken out of context in order to push narratives. Like that Voosh dialogue part, if that was posted on social media with no context, of course people would think it's awful. It's the same thing with that other clip that's circulating where Frey makes fun of Cuff and calls him a serial killer.
Destruction and corruption are forms of creation in themselves.
Wow, you sound like a serial killer.
What?
Destruction and corruption are beautiful forms of creation in themselves.
I don't sound like that.
You absolutely sound like that.
I know you absolutely sound like that. Yeah, see? Two can play at that game.
Out of context, it seems weird, but if you played the game and then started to see what they were going for, which is Uncharted meets Infamous meets Final Fantasy, it starts to make sense, even though, yes, it doesn't always land. Look, I know I may sound like I'm defending Forspoken hard here, but the reality is I don't think it's a bad game. Of course, I also don't believe it's a masterpiece, and I definitely can understand valid criticism, like how you can't move when Cuff has questions, which is a bizarre choice that they should change. And you should also be able to change your magic challenges from your magic menu at any time too, but those are things that can be easily fixed. But if you follow the channel, you know that I don't sugarcoat things and just say what I think, and I honestly believe so far anyway that Forspoken is enjoyable and it has some interesting ideas too. Like its super fast movement and the combat that's just fun to do. Again, I'm not terribly far, I'm about 7 or 8 hours in, but I can't deny that I'm having fun and I'm enjoying it. But do I think it's worth full price? Well, for me personally, I would say yes, but for others, my answer would be I think you should play the demo that's available first. If you end up vibing with the combat and the movement, I think there's enjoyment to be had here. However, also understand that Forspoken does not reinvent the open world genre in any crazy way outside of its movement. And I have a creeping suspicion that in the coming months or even years, people are going to look back on Forspoken and realize they were being kind of unfair towards it. I want to be fully transparent, I was not gifted a review copy or anything. I bought the game with my own money and I am playing it at launch. And so far anyway, if I compare Forspoken to the endless open world games we have these days, It's very much in rhythm with the rest of them for better and for worse. I do plan to speak about the state of open world games soon, but I'll leave that for its own video. But do I believe I wasted my money on Forspoken? Honestly, no. I'm enjoying it. But then again, I enjoyed the Callisto Protocol too, and I tend to enjoy games that other people deem bad, so maybe my sense of enjoyment is busted, or maybe, and this is more likely, I just prefer to make up my own mind and experience things for myself. If you hate Forspoken but haven't played it, I think you should at least try the demo yourself. As far as being the latest game people are dogpiling on and ripping apart, I do think Forspoken doesn't deserve the nuclear level of hate that it's getting. It's definitely not a great game, but it's nowhere near as bad as most are making it out to be. If I had to give it an arbitrary numbered score because people enjoy having numbers to quantify the quality of things, I would give Forspoken a solid 7 at best so far. While it's not going to set the world on fire, it's just another open world game that at the very least brings some of its own ideas and differs itself with its crazy fast movement and Final Fantasy magic combat. I do believe, however, that if this game was labeled a Final Fantasy game and they just took the Agni Philosophy's design and just made that into its own game proper, this would have been much better received for sure. But I do think Frey is decent so far as a protagonist, and I think her actress Elle Balinska does a solid job with what she's given. Also, just wanted to point out that in a recent post by Elle Balinska, Sony and Square sent her a PS5 and a physical copy of Forspoken, but the PS5 they sent her is digital only, so she can't play the copy that they sent her, which I mean, you would think that they would know that. Why would you send a copy of the game when she can't even play the copy with her PS5? I don't know, just a weird thing I noticed, but anyways. If you enjoy big open world games with lots of stuff to collect and all the usual bells and whistles that come along with that sort of game, you'll probably enjoy Forspoken. But if you're looking for the next big thing like Elden Ring, this is definitely not it. And when I look at the review scores and see how these outlets are giving this game such a low score when it runs decently well and nothing is busted, at least in my experience anyways, yet those same review sites gave other big games glowing reviews when they were completely unplayable at launch, yeah, consider me skeptical with taking their opinions seriously. Anyway, that's my impression so far on Forspoken. It's a decent game with some solid gameplay systems that I'm sure will expand as I play more of it. I fully expect this game to have a warmer reception as time goes on, but for now, I truly do not consider this game to be a disaster like so many others are making it out to be. Am I wrong or am I right? Let me know in the comments. Forspoken is not terrible, but it's not great either. It's just another open world game to throw in the pile, and frankly, I'm getting tired of open worlds. Anyways, thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you in the next one.
Great start.